Plymouth has got a lot of history. Lot of history.
I feel like stepping back in time.
There's pockets wherever you go, though, isn't there? There's pockets of parts of George Street's a
Bit rough George Street, yeah.
But you know, that's life now, isn't it?
Well, we used to go fishing a lot, so obviously next to the river, a lot of us used to go fishing, like we used to play football. Well, back then there wasn't a lot of use for people because the Navy used to control the pitches and that, so there were no barracks just there, you just see the part of it still there.
Prime Minister has paid a surprise visit to Plymouth, another heavy sufferer in the recent air raids on the coast, a town which is battered but unbroken.
Heroes, or villains according to your point of view, are two men with a plan. James Peyton Watson, the city engineer, and Professor Abercrombie.
Last time I came down here, anybody could come and use the track. Now there that says no dogs, that's in letters that high.
I'm Jean Taylor. I'm the licensee of the Optical Social Club.
Union Street has changed quite a bit in the last
Romanian
years. I've been here, City Council, doing their best to sort of upgrade all that and I think eventually it will be someplace.
Certainly done a lot of work in the industry, and I honestly think that it's going to be a lot better.
It's mainly sport days, but I wouldn't have thought there's enough football over there. You'd have to have a
pushing forward, aren't they? Their community involved.
Fence all the way around, I remember rightly.
Which is appealing to people to come.
Yes, not so at the brickfields. It's not only cars driving down.
They've added bits to it over the time, but it still looks
Now they're ripping all this down, I think it's
convenient, it's in the centre of town, and
It's definitely worn out as a place. And
I love the great big department stores.
it's not that pretty.
because it's where the car parking is.
I like the smaller shops.
We're all a bit of a community here, isn't it? They're all going, so, but as long as I can stay here, who knows what the future holds, in it will be next, like, you know. There was a few hundred people still here and everyone loved it.
There needs to be a place for those sort of shops, but it doesn't have to be in the city.
You could make it into a quite attractive, lined
Put some trees in, maybe
families
about
to sort of come and enjoy quieter areas, sort of sell. You can weave in and out of smaller shops. They're still very modern, have a lot on offer, a lot of variety.
We want you back in Colin Camp.
Now, unemployment in the UK has risen to its highest level for almost 2 years. Official figures show almost 700,000 people have come off payrolls since March, and economists expect more jobs to be lost as the government's furlough scheme is phased out.
Do you think it's affecting your sort of mental health and your physical health being out there?
Yeah, it does. But yeah, my mental health will be, quite low.
We are in a housing crisis. This isn't just a few people feeling hard done by. This is a lot of people who are potentially in a very precarious situation.
They are probably some of the highest figures that I've seen. Because people keep chucking money at this, and unless they're addressing the bigger system changes, you and I will be having this conversation from the start.
There's only one place this will end up. More children from poor backgrounds
failed by schools who simply can't afford to give them the education and support they need.
I get this good feeling about all the things that I could be. And then I never became any of them.
There is a high crime rate in this area, I feel, because of the social deprivation. A lot of movement in and out of the area. The drugs obviously attract the wrong type of person into the area, and to get money for the drugs, people are committing crime.
Every time we have a chance to get ahead, they move the finish line.
Critics around the world have called it a remarkable film event, a breathtaking experience, a fusion of image and sound.
Image and sound.
Until now, you've never really seen the world you live in.
يغرقون وإن
like this, which we can barely wrap our minds around.
قطعة أرض مثلا أو
Union Street, you've got great pockets of wealth, but next to that you've got true great pockets of poverty as well. And Union Street is still caught between those two issues, isn't it? Really, how you can attract that wealth into the street, that can bring up the standard of the street and lift the aspirations of people living within Union Street.
It is a human disaster, an economical disaster, an agricultural disaster, and maybe it will lead not only to poverty but also to hunger. People will have to leave this land if we don't protect it.
We need also to establish a good balance.
Coming in India's report, 3,6,161
worst recession since the Great Depression of the 1990s.
Union Street was the place to go in the late 80s and 90s, where we used to go for a real good night out, you know? It was not where you'd want to take your mum, though, I'll tell you that. But it felt very safe and inclusive, you know, just for us Plymouvians. Free bloody parking.
Almost as old as history, Egypt. A thin ribbon of water is the source of life for 20 million people, clustered along the banks of one of the most important rivers in the world, the Nile.
Value and culture. It is not a place I would ever want to go with my family any time of the day. I would really love to see performing arts and music displays on Union Street. Like some of the parties, I can remember who does them now, or a concert. I would love to go to an art performance, but would be brilliant, I reckon.
Its infancy in Egypt along the shores of the river. But Egypt is struggling for a new and modern life. Here at Aswan, the Nile, Egypt's only reliable source of water, is trapped in a reservoir 100 miles long.
Change. It happens most of all to the edge, the boundary, the spaces between. But what becomes of these former landscapes, peppered through a porous urbanity? They do not remain confined or restrained, seeking to reclaim their prestige.
Given Egypt's lack of rainfall, the desert capital will likely have to rely on the country's most precious resource, the River Nile.
Lying dormant, awaiting an unlocking of space. It is a felt absence, that of landscape, of a place liminal in condition, neither urbanized and rigid, nor porous and flowing.
The point of the project I'm working on is really to engage people who wouldn't have the green space.
Central, old magazines that's gone to. There is no Union Street anymore, I don't think. It used to be like the party capital of Plymouth.
Even the diverse economy in Damietta has not been spared.
But parts of the city look like they've been neglected for decades.
Absolutely beautiful. We'd love you to keep it and preserve it.
I'm working on Grey Stonehouse is really to tackle social isolation. People might not have a reason to get out of their house.
This standoff is about water, history, and politics. It's about who sets the rules, and it's about how these nations can be.
The porosity of landscape blends us and space. A border does not exist to landscape.
Everyone should have some access to green space, whether it's an allotment plot or whether it's coming to get involved in community gardens, because it really makes you feel better about the world. It really does.
harder almost than any other city. But Plymouth also started to make its recovery before any of the others.
Everybody would help one another. There wasn't any sort of animosity or anything like that. You would all help one another.
People thought the devastation was so great that there couldn't be any recovery, but people were planning how to deal with it, and here in Plymouth we were making those kind of plans.
The ideal street for getting run over. All it should be is a link between the city centre and the dockyard. There oughtn't to be any shops here at all.
The old Plymouth was a warmer, nicer place, I think, to live in. But now the new Plymouth seems to be so strange to everyone, but the old Plymouth was really homely.
Union Street is synonymous with drinking and having a good time, and this was just such an ideal location at the top end before everybody goes down to Clubland.
They've certainly done a lot of work in Union Street, and I honestly think that it's going to be a lot better.
Stay at home.
I hope in the years to come, everyone will be able to take pride in how they responded to this challenge. And those who come after us will say the Britons of this generation were as strong as any.
Utilising our Project Zeros, Project Ones, our emerging research and design, we generated themes of experience, activation, and engaging the body through play. These initial themes were then crystallised into notions of embedding sense of place and identity in the open fabric. We initially started to interrogate the site through a macroscopic lens, mapping morphology and networks of interconnections. However, in this process we realised that to interrogate themes of identity and sense of place, we had to know the site through a more intimate experiential lens, from the ground up. We chose to begin to know place by crafting an initial series of strata and typology studies, which began to reveal the informal and intimate nature of the cityscape. Whether strong form or weak, the pre-planned regions of the city are infilled by self-built and self-organised communities, weaving in disparate elements of fabric such as discarded pieces of shuttering or stonework 2,000 years old. As we came to know these typological structures and the intimate networks and identities present within the strata, we began to know a rooted notion of place. Also present in this notion of place is a distinct connection to the water through cultural and ritual ties, an independent ownership of agriculture, as well as a distinct heritage of craft and construction.
To briefly research human threats to identity, we quickly found that by the process of freshwater scarcity and saltwater ingress, the notions that form as locality would be separated and disrupted without immediate and sensitive action. Present qualities at sea level rise highlight an immediate threat to the built fabric. However, issues of saltwater ingress, acidity increase, and the erosion are also directly linked. All of the above factors directly affect agriculture and the availability of water, destabilising the pillars of identity we have previously revealed. As well as this, present issues apparent from the accelerated industrialisation of Damietta branch have resulted in the widespread pollution in the form of heavy metals, plastic pollution and industrial waste effluents, corrupting the water course and sterilising ancient lagoon networks. The combination of these factors has the capacity to completely destabilise the economy and locality of a region. They must be addressed immediately in order to prevent erasure of its grounded identity.
With this rich yet fragile identity found and the threats of erasure on the horizon, we chose to utilise the problem as the solution by orienting our scheme towards desalination and treatment of water. Engaging the people directly in this effort, we chose to construct this strategy from the ground up, utilising existing skills of craft and production. Combining this with larger infrastructural developments funded and implemented by the government but operated and owned by the communities threatened by these factors, it will heal divides between the wider governmental agencies and smaller community groups. This scheme would be developed in a phased approach, utilising natural biocultures to reduce the amount of hard industry required. This scheme speaks of a support and infill approach, used frequently in Western regeneration. However, as we have immediately recognised that large infrastructural schemes are treated with mistrust, our urban strategy operates as the opposite, a sensitive ligature of support informed by our detailed studies into identity and sense of place.
Coming into the specifics of how the desalination and treatment strategy operates, at the periphery of our scheme we have a region of brine and untreated seawater that is held back by a series of berms. Set within this region are existing communities that maintain a network of bioindicators, structures that highlight the quality of water present in terms of heavy metal content, salinity and pH. This brine is firstly sent through initial desalination plants and industrial effluent treatment plants. These schemes then allow the water to be further treated by natural means. Without this heavy industry, these components would then be allowed to re-enter the food chain. The second region contains a series of biocultures which mitigate the high acidity, pollution and salinity present, allowing the water to then pass into a third region of community-operated treatment. At each stage the salinity is decreased and the process is almost completely in the hands of the people, giving a substantial ownership over the process to these communities.
The components catalysing this scheme include a bioindicator workshop. This workshop crafts and maintains bioindicators which are situated through both lagoons where industrial effluents are detected for action to be taken. The workshop has an experiential aspect through ritual growing, caring and ceremonial release of the indicators.
A kinetics hall. The kinetics hall acts as a vessel for assembly and development of kinetic generators that provide sustainable power to surrounding communities, allowing for an independent ownership of electricity.
Ship infill and boat building workshops. So areas that currently exist will adapt to the rise in water levels and embrace a new way of living next to and onto the water. With the need of boats and ships, workshops will begin to appear between the current informal settlements. This in itself is a catalyst which embraces a messy vitality way of living.
Accompanied with these are saltwater berms, sustainable power, desalination plant, industrial effluent removal, pH bioreactors, water farms, sustainable construction hubs, algae reactors, and the city centre reservoir and infrastructure. These elements support existing communities and infrastructure present from the periphery to the city centre, giving a voice to the people and awareness of water and making it distinctively weaved through everyday life. After the initial implementation of the scheme in Damietta, we hope that an advanced model could be transferred to other coastal cities with similar issues in the Nile Delta. Over time, we would hope that this movement would generate a powerful voice to lobby the government to restrict industrial pollution to the Nile Delta and ensure protection of natural environments into Egypt's projected future.
Urban cycles, time, remembrance, and ritual. The urban strategy reflects a philosophy that emerged throughout the design process, one in which time is not linear, but cyclical. This philosophy stems from the readings and philosophies by Strauss and Howe, Deleuze-Guattari, Bateson, and Ravelli, to understand the concept of time and its influence within the urban. Also present in the system of the urban is its multiplicity, this forming over time. We can understand the urban to be this complex system, but struggle to define it. Is this because we too are stuck in linear ways of thinking? Would an alternative perspective offer chances and opportunities to interpret and map differently? The use of diagramming, videos, generative videos, mapping, precedents, and theory are used throughout the project to understand the concept of the urban, time, rhizomatic theory to produce an urban strategy that responds to the temporal conditions of the urban. Through this understanding of the urban being a rhizome, and understanding its complexity and connections between all the different social, cultural, economic, political, and environmental factors which comprise the urban landscape. If we look at the rhizome and see that it is constantly changing, dynamic, and always in flux, what interventions can we produce to respect this force? The strategy consists of one key catalyst and constantly changing interventions that come and go according to the order of time. These interventions respond to the current situational climate of the world, whether that be any combination of social, cultural, economic, political, or environmental factors, and would be sacrificially burnt in a ritual of remembrance when no longer required by the community. This process of the ritual that is proposed entails a period of recording to allow for reflections and education on the reasons why certain interventions are needed, and to keep a record of what responses occur for what situations. These recordings and ashes left behind from the burnings of the timbers are stored within a temple of remembrance. The ashes are to be seen by all and act as a visual reminder of the current time, as well as being offered up to the proposed infrastructure full of trees that can be farmed for the next cycle of the urban, ready for the next rebuilding phase. This strategy aims to bring awareness and educate on the temporal nature and concept of time within the urban built environment, and allows for new rituals to be participated in, where everyone comes together to reflect on the time, the culture, and the world in which we reside. So how do we get here? What is the beginning of this cycle? We start at Project Zero, Web City, an alternative real. This looks at an alternative reality of cities and how virtual reality can provide a heterotopia and escape within virtual landscapes and cities. But the focus was more on how does these different districts of various different subcultures, zones, interact, and what happens on the peripheries of these. And then we go on to Project 1, called Collisions, an urban palimpsest. And this identifies and uncovers key areas of intervention through the occurrence of conditional overlaps within the field of operation. The fourth turning. This heavily influenced the project in its initial stages, as it talks about time in a completely different manner to what is traditionally taught, that is, time being linear. And it brings up the idea of time being cyclical, that is, it goes around in seasons or turn-ins. We need to recall that time, in its physical essence, is nothing but the measurement of cyclicality itself, whether the swing of a pendulum, the orbit of a planet, or the frequency of a laser beam. The assumed regularity of a cyclical event is literally all we have to define what time is. So how do we relate this theory of time to the urban, and how do we map this? The evolution of time. A diagram which maps all the different socio-cultural elements of the field of operation into one image to see the various ebbs and flows of time, to see if there are any repeats or overlaps, collisions of anything, to see if there are any trends that maybe could help us look into or predict the future. But this map is very linear, and maybe it was a Western approach to trying to understand time. So I took each individual time profile and mapped them into a cyclical manner, or circle. This helps us then to see if there was any self-perpetuating or repeating cycles. Combining all the profiles, we get this image, a mess. The overlaps, collisions, and multiplicity of this image of time as a concept and visualization of this further exemplifies the complexity of time itself and the urban. Steps through an Ecology of Mind by Bateson. He says that the division of things into parts tends to be a device of convenience, and that's all. He illustrates the arbitrariness of the kind of separations that are created by defining things, so that when we define something as separate from something else, we create limits to our ability to see the interrelationships and the dynamics of those interrelationships, which I think is something we do via the process of mapping the urban. By mapping, we're ultimately saying that because it is mapped, it is, and the city is more complex than this. It's a rhizome. So what is a rhizome? It's neither a subject or an object. It's only magnitudes and dimensions. These can't change in number without completely changing its nature. So everything is multiple and related. to map the multiplicity of the site. This map started as a Nolly map, and it took the theories just discussed and tries to map more. So it started mapping cyclical time onto it, the flood levels, photographs and memories, and personal aspects from the site, to illustrate that the urban is much more than one thing. The city is a multiplicity of things that also changes over time. So another way of looking at the urban that speaks of time, and instead of 2D maps, would be to produce videos which enabled us to look at the complexity of time in another manner. A series of artworks and explorative works was undergone to try and illustrate the urban rhizome and time, but all these lacked an overall narrative, so one video was produced to help explain the process of these other dynamic maps. The resulting video shows how everything is connected, comes together, interlinked in one. The rhizome of the city can be seen and is never static. Ravelli's The Order of Time brings about one key point. Things are transformed one into another according to necessity, and render justice to one another according to the order of time. Anne Maxander. So how can this be implemented within the urban? How do we elevate the present social divides? Well, we can create common ground with a sense of ownership. Educational divides. We can give access to education to all. Health divides. We can inspire healthy living, healthy eating, and promote healthy lifestyles within our urban fabric. Economic divides. We can provide easy access to work to all. Accessibility divides. Within an infrastructure which supports all of these. And where? Mapping cultural, education, and socio-economic links and looking at the influences that they have on each other, we can see the present collisions and voids within the field of operation. So we can begin with this epicenter of deprivation, divide, and voids. Strategy. The strategy consists of one key catalyst and constantly changing interventions that come and go according to the order of time. These interventions respond to the current situational climate of the urban. The seasons within the strategy. There's growth, the interventions, ritual, and remembrance, with the temple recordings educating on the needs of the world that day, as well as questioning the needs of the world today. This cycle within the urban unifies and brings a sense of one to the existing communities and provides, according to the order of time.
The brief this year prompts us to develop an urban strategy for the regeneration of a field of operation.
Our chosen site, the city of Damietta, is situated towards the north of Egypt within the Nile Delta. The city is located on low-lying ground, making it vulnerable for future environmental changes. With a population of approximately 1 million at risk, the need for an urban intervention is paramount.
Our exploration of the site continued through mapping of the centripetal and centrifugal forces in our field of operation. The initial site analysis maps out the urban fabric to reveal its qualities. Through the model, we explored the layers of the site that resembled its historical evolution and how these changes are situated on site today. We observed the urban fabric within the palimpsest, unveiling notions of centripetal or centrifugal forces exerted by the current fabric striving to claim the liminal land to enhance their presence within Damietta.
Further signs of these forces can be experienced at the street level, between the east and west banks. The east consists of more liberated characteristics, such as varying building heights, Western influences, individualistic housing, and access to public spaces. This is contrasted with the West Bank that exerts traditional characteristics such as close-knit communities, large agricultural plots, and signs of gentrification spreading from the East Bank.
Deeper analysis of vulnerable communities located further away from the waterfront revealed a more traditional livelihood. However, closer to the water's edge you go, these traditional livelihoods seem to fade away into a more liberated and modernised lifestyle.
When investigating transportation links, it was revealed that despite the dense regions of the city, there existed insufficient modes of transport. Within only one bus station, majority of transportation is carried out through cars, motorbikes, cycling, and walking. Prevalent through most regions of the slums are very narrow streets that barely accommodates the various modes of transport, restricting mobility within neighborhoods.
Analysis of the site exposed a distinct shortage of public spaces for both men and women. Some of these public spaces are excluded from society as they're made up of gated areas with restricted routes of access. However, these spaces are dominated by the male population, suggesting an imbalance in gender representation within the city. This imbalance placed an additional level of vulnerability to the female population alongside traditional perceptions of gender roles.
As we aim to create a dynamic city, it is crucial to analyse the future environmental scenarios that would need to be considered in our master plan. With the future sea level rise prediction for the site, it was revealed that the West Bank would become even more vulnerable, enhancing the dynamic approach to the urban strategy.
We would like to propose an urban strategy that seeks to create an equal representation between social, physical, and environmental dimensions that achieve the overall aim of a balanced, dynamic city. The urban strategy presents 3 building programs that will act as main interventions for addressing issues of the urban fabric, the social networks, and the transport networks. From our analysis, all 3 key themes had an issue of gender inequalities. This will become the overarching issue that would guide our spatial strategy.
Our initial approach for the urban strategy began with a mapping of the existing site that created the foundation of our master plan. The West Bank displayed qualities of stronger linear gestures that were juxtaposed by the organic nature of the Eastern Bank. This highlighted the imbalance and disparities present in the urban form, giving us the insight for how to achieve balance in the physical form.
Initial gestures for achieving balance were explored through physical manipulation of the existing forms. By combining the juxtaposing conditions, we realised that the interconnectedness of the 2 forms created the catalyst for achieving the balance in the physical dimension. Balance requires the presence of both.
We embedded our research and approach within 4 theoretical themes: the importance of maintaining dialogue in relationships, the inequalities present within cities, understanding the spirit of place, and the need for interconnectedness between varying individuals.
Bakhtin's theory of dialogism suggests that objects gain importance through their engagement with the other. The exercise studies the type of dialogue that was carried out across the temporal dimension, revealing major dialogical shifts between the natural and human worlds.
Here we identify threads of Lefebvre's theory revealing the inconsistencies in the way women and men navigate through their everyday activities.
Looking at the genius loci theory, we exemplify how we intend to create connectivity between the Nile and the inner city.
The Gaia theory understands the importance of the individual systems and highlights that only by working together can a balanced working system be achieved.
In understanding that balance extends to the morphology of the urban realm, the urban strategy borrows the existing forms. Strong linear gestures have been extended to create a contrast with the curvaceous Nile. Nodes that are geometrically formed by the existing fabric are implemented within the rectilinear forms to find the middle ground between the geometries.
The urban strategy takes the approach of a layered system.
Nodes that resemble courtyards have been placed as community gathering spaces to increase the social stability in Damietta. These have been formed by the geometry of the existing infrastructure and embedded within the rectilinear urban form to find the middle ground between the organic and linear characteristics of Damietta.
These nodes form part of the building programs that will aid in revitalizing the community's social, living, and mobility experiences.
The new linear water channels are integrated in the community to serve multiple purposes. Primarily, they will help to mitigate sea level rise disasters. Furthermore, they will serve as gestures in bringing the waterfront experience to the deprived communities. And finally, they will serve as additional modes of water transportation networks.
Existing transport links have been repurposed as a non-intrusive approach for improving mobility in the future dynamic city. These dry ground transportation networks encourage sustainable modes of transport and reduce the presence of single-use vehicles. These networks will encourage safer forms of mobility opportunities throughout the city, such as cycling, more bus and train transport, and pedestrian-friendly access.
Green corridors are further implemented to integrate the green, natural world with the daily lives of the locals. The corridors mimic the new water lines and the Nile's edge to encourage waterfront access and allow for public spaces to be freely enjoyed by all people. The green bands also work in conjunction with the flood mitigation strategy.
Secondary organic water channels provide the smaller links between communities, whilst connecting key gathering nodes. They serve as further overspills for mitigating additional floods created by storm surges and flash floodings.
A series of pedestrian-friendly bridges have been incorporated as notions for reconnecting the east and west banks, whilst encouraging ease of movement and mobility throughout the city. Further gestures of green bandings are made on the east bank to maintain the public accessibility of the waterfront.
The individual layers, though not successful on their own, when working together, create a dynamic and balanced city that can successfully adapt to various environmental conditions. Our 3 programs include a community hub set out to facilitate the well-being of community members, a transportation hub forging sustainable and accessible modes of transport throughout the city, a housing and recreational centre fostering the development of affordable and versatile housing.
We wanted our urban strategy to align with the sustainable goals that Damietta has put in place for 2030. The completion of these 3 phases would help us to achieve the dynamic city that naturally adapts to the flooding conditions of 2050.